That was soft. That was cool.
You want to rant about something?
What? Oh, yeah. Everything's VistaVision right now, and it's brought with it some baggage.
Sorry, what baggage?
Like waves on a beach. Large format cinematography is once again in the conversation. It's at the center of the conversation. Many movies in the past few years have used VistaVision in particular, or 70mm formats or IMAX. You have Sinners, One Battle After Another, The Brutalist, the list goes on.
It is better.
Filmmakers who employ these larger than standard negatives often praise it in very heightened terms. I want to focus on one in particular, which is that with a larger negative area, larger sensor area, larger format, you can achieve a wider field of view with a longer lens, a lower, what we call a crop factor, and that this has a kind of innate effect on the perspective of the image. There's a lot to unpack here, but let's start with the words of some of the cinematographers who've employed it. Lowell Crawley. The biggest draw of VistaVision is the
field of view. When we tested it at Pinewood Studios, 35mm against 16 against VistaVision, it was like, whoa, suddenly it's like we realized you get this intimacy, but you also have this wide field of view.
Photographing any sort of architecture, generally you tend to want to have minimal distortion. With a bigger format, you're not forced to shoot on wider angle lenses for a wider field of view. You know, you can get the same field of view on a longer lens, which is obviously minimizes distortion.
Roger Deakins. I love the LF format, the large format.
Because you can shoot a close-up on a 40 and it doesn't have the distortion of a 35 or 32, but it has the field of view somewhere between a 35 and a 32, I think. Something like that, anyway. Somehow it feels more natural to me, that format.
So this makes intuitive sense, right? Wide-angle lenses distort. And so if you can shoot on a longer lens and then widen the field of view with a larger negative so you can get a wider image without having to shoot on a more distorting lens, right? Larger negative area, smaller crop factor, wider field of view, and still see more of the world, but still get the intimacy of the close lens. In fact, this phenomenon is so profound that the promotional materials of various camera manufacturers either directly say or imply as much. I quote, "Large format opens some new creative possibilities using a shallow depth of field to guide the audience's view and provide a wonderful bokeh. It also conveys a perspective truer to the human eye, resulting in a seemingly increased dimensional depth." Ari's website also has tons of language specifying a distinct and cinematic aesthetic tied to large format. Here's a conversation between cinematographers John Fowler and Don Burgess in the Film and Digital Times. "It just looks better in large format because of the more compressed perspectives that you can get in large format. You're using longer lenses and getting wider shots. Yes, I think that the bigger format in 8K with these essentially medium format lenses allows you to shoot much wider and still not get distortion."
So what's the problem?
You're gonna include my dabbing, I know. What's the problem? So here's the thing. The idea that shooting on a larger format can do something ineffable that produces a wider perspective that is fundamentally different than simply shooting on a wider lens is essentially false. It's nonsense. Doesn't exist.
What?
Let me show you. You are now looking at me on a camera with a full-frame sensor, a crop factor of 1.0, and a 35mm lens. Here I am on a sensor with a crop factor of 1.5, a super 35mm sensor, with a lens that has been zoomed out to 23mm to compensate for the difference in crop factor. As you see, the perspective around me, the relationship between me and the background should be, my posture notwithstanding, virtually identical, because nothing about the camera's angle of view has changed. The angle of view is a function of the math equation between crop factor and focal length, nothing else. Here I am on a camera with a crop factor of 2.0, what we call a micro four thirds size sensor, around super 16mm in terms of film gauge. To compensate, we have again put a wider lens on there. It's a 17mm lens. As you can see, these two variables cancel each other out because angle of view is just a result of that math equation between the sensor size and the focal length of the lens. As you can see, there's nothing inherent about the larger sensor that we can't recreate on the smaller sensor and vice versa. Of course, depth of field is something that has to be compensated for, and as you have smaller sensor sizes, it becomes more difficult to engineer shallow focus. But unless you're on the extreme ends of that, an extremely small sensor, or want an extremely shallow focus or otherwise, this can mostly be compensated for. Stick a short lens on a small sensor, stick a long lens on a big sensor, you get functionally, as far as perspective and angle of view go, the same result. Hey, oh, we did it. Ah! That brings us to perspective. This camera here feels close to me because it is close to me. It's only 3 feet away. That camera there feels distant from me because it is around 15 to 20 feet away from me. The perspective of these two cameras exists totally independently of the technology of the camera, the size of the sensor, type of lens. It is entirely determined by physically where we put the camera. Now, the question of compression or distortion is a function of two things: perspective and angle of view. Move from this camera here to that one that has been cropped in significantly now, you can see that you get the perceptual effect that we call compression, right? Because it is both far away and currently features a very narrow field of view. And so what results is the effect of compression.
How is this so pervasive? Why are so many high-profile figures vocally mistaken about this?
First, it's built on the foundation of things that can be true. 1, there are benefits to shooting on a large format. 2, that focal length is a fixed thing, and larger formats, when combined with otherwise identical imaging systems, identical lenses, will produce wider images, all other things being equal, assuming the lens can project an image big enough to fill that sensor, which isn't always the case. But none of those things logically lead to the conclusion frequently being reached here, which is that there is something unique about increasing the size of your format in terms of perspective and the width of your lenses and the relationship of your camera to your subject. There's a gap there. And that gap is filled by a combination of the inertia of received wisdom and the profit and marketing motives of the companies selling these tools.
Okay, so people are wrong about this, even the greatest living cinematographers. What's the actual tangible effect of being wrong? Why does that matter?
Because being incorrect about something doesn't inevitably mean you're going to do bad work. If you've been using a consistent tool set for decades and decades, you don't need to be right about the effects of large format sizes, right? I often see a connection drawn between friction-heavy processes, whether those mean labor friction, financial friction, and this idea that your final product will be imbued with something special as a result of those. You can build a process that might not be efficient. Efficiency is not why we're here. But inefficiency does not necessarily equate to value. And I think it's worth questioning the decisions we're making when we start to lean on friction-heavy processes.
So, do you think Roger Deakins is good?
Is Roger Deakins good? He's amazing. He's wonderful. Good guy.